Imagine this. A routine traffic stop takes a shocking turn when a group of white officers confronts a black man with unnecessary hostility. Their assumptions lead to insults and mistreatment, completely unaware that this man is not just any citizen. He's the new head of their department's internal affairs. What starts as an abuse of power quickly spirals into a moment of reckoning when the truth about his identity is revealed. The situation is tense, the stakes are high, and the officers are about to face consequences they never saw coming. But how did it get to this point? And what happens next when justice is in the hands of the very person they disrespected? Stay tuned, because this story will leave you thinking about accountability, integrity, and the importance of challenging stereotypes. This is one moment they'll never forget, and neither will you. It all started on a quiet afternoon when the man, dressed in plain clothes, was driving through a neighborhood not far from the precinct. He wasn't speeding, wasn't breaking any laws, just another face on the road. But to the officers, something about him seemed suspicious. They pulled him over, their tone sharp and accusatory from the start. Questions flew at him faster than he could answer, and their approach was anything but professional. What they didn't know was that this man had just been appointed to oversee cases like this. He had spent years advocating for accountability and reform, and now he was in charge of making sure officers upheld the very principles they swore to protect. As the situation escalated, the man remained calm, even as the tension in the air thickened. He knew the power of his silence, but he also knew this encounter wasn't over yet. As the officers continued their interrogation, the man remained composed, though he could feel their aggression growing. They asked invasive questions, their words loaded with assumptions. "Where are you coming from? Why are you in this area?" one of them barked. The man responded politely, his calm demeanor only seeming to frustrate them further. One officer leaned closer, his voice dripping with authority, trying to provoke a reaction. Meanwhile, the man silently observed their behavior, noting every detail, the tone of their voices, the way they handled their authority, and the lack of any clear justification for the stop. He knew the moment he revealed who he was, everything would change. But for now, he let them dig themselves deeper. Inside the patrol car, another officer joked about writing a ticket just to teach him a lesson, unaware of the lesson they were about to learn themselves. The air was thick with tension, and the man's silence spoke louder than words. The officers were playing a dangerous game, but they had no idea who they were dealing with, or how close they were to a reckoning that would shake their department to its core. The officers' frustration grew as the man refused to react the way they expected. One of them, clearly impatient, asked him to step out of the car. His calm compliance only seemed to unnerve them more. They searched his vehicle without cause, making comments under their breath that were impossible to ignore. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather, watching the scene unfold with a mix of confusion and unease. The man could feel the weight of the moment, knowing this wasn't just about him. It was about the people watching, the countless others who had experienced moments like this, but didn't have the power to fight back. He knew what had to be done, but waited for the right moment, the one that would make the most impact. Just as one officer began to escalate the situation further, the man finally spoke up. His voice, steady and unwavering, cut through the tension like a knife. "I think it's time we had a real conversation," he said, pulling out his credentials and holding them up for everyone to see. The officers froze, their confidence evaporating as they realized who they had been dealing with. The crowd murmured, sensing something big was about to happen. But the moment wasn't over yet. The truth was only just beginning to unravel. The officers stared at the badge in disbelief, their faces paling as the reality sank in. The man they had belittled and mistreated wasn't just any authority figure. He was the new head of internal affairs, the person tasked with holding officers accountable. A heavy silence filled the air as they exchanged uneasy glances, scrambling to figure out their next move. One of them stammered an apology, but the man's expression remained unreadable. Just as the tension reached its peak, another officer arrived on the scene. He approached with a confident stride, clearly unaware of what had just unfolded. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing at the man with the same dismissive attitude his colleagues had displayed earlier. But before anyone could respond, the new officer said something that stopped everyone cold. "I've seen you before," he muttered, narrowing his eyes at the man. "Weren't you the one investigating Officer Grant last year?" The atmosphere shifted again, this time charged with something darker. The man didn't flinch, but could sense the sudden discomfort among the group. This wasn't just a routine traffic stop anymore. It was personal. The officer's tone carried a veiled threat, and the others quickly realized there was more to this encounter than they had first thought. The stakes were higher now, and the man knew he had to tread carefully. What had started as an abuse of power had turned into something far more dangerous, and the truth was about to expose more than anyone was prepared for. The man turned to the officer who had recognized him, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I was the one investigating Officer Grant. And now it looks like I'll need to investigate this entire incident as well." His words hung in the air, a sharp reminder of the power he held in this moment. The officers stood frozen, their confidence completely eroded. But just as the tension seemed to reach its breaking point, the man's phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly, then looked up at the group. "Interesting," he said, holding up the screen. It was a live notification. Someone in the crowd had been recording the entire encounter and streaming it online. Thousands of viewers were already tuned in, commenting furiously about what they were witnessing. The officers' faces drained of color as they realized this wasn't just about internal repercussions anymore. The whole world was watching. The man took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle in. "You've forgotten the oath you took to serve and protect," he said firmly. "But don't worry, I'll make sure this gets handled properly." With that, he walked back to his car, leaving the stunned officers behind. As he drove away, he couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. They had tried to exert power over him, but in the end, their actions had exposed a deeper problem, a system that desperately needed change. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring about what they had just witnessed. But as the man drove off, his mind was already racing with what came next. Little did anyone know, the officer who had recognized him had his own secrets, ones that could complicate everything further. The story wasn't over yet, and the man was determined to see it through to the very end. In the days that followed, the video of the incident went viral, sparking widespread discussions about accountability and the misuse of power. The officers involved were placed under investigation, and the man, now fully identified as the head of internal affairs, became a symbol of calm resistance and justice. His measured response during the encounter resonated with many, highlighting the importance of reform within the system. Behind the scenes, he began compiling evidence, not just about that day, but about deeper patterns of behavior within the department. The officer who had recognized him resigned shortly after, unable to explain certain connections that surfaced during the investigation. The man's work had only just begun, but this incident served as a powerful reminder of why he took the position in the first place. As he walked into his office one morning, he paused, reflecting on everything. Change wasn't easy, but moments like these proved it was possible.